Hi, this is the Firefly Circle, a platform which showcases inspirational stories from thought leaders, digital creators from different walks of life. In today's episode, we will be talking to a man who believes in pushing his limits. He is Mumbai based skydiver, base jumper, gravity tester, Sajid Chogle. Hi, Sajid,
Hi,
and welcome to the Firefly Circle.
thank you so much. The pleasure is mine, Kush.
Yeah. So, Sajid, to begin with, I think our audience would be interested in knowing, what led you to the passion of skydiving. Why skydiving?
Uh, Tell me something, Kush. If given the option, wouldn't you want to fly?
I would love to fly.
Exactly. I think growing up as kids, all of us want to experience, or as humans, I'm sure uh, that's what happened in the past, right? People wanted to experience what is it to feel like a bird. I guess that's what happened to me growing up. I saw all these cartoons of men transforming into flying people, to name a few Centurions and Silverhawks. And I think that's where the story started.
Great. So, I think gravity is like your best friend and sky like your second home. Is that how you actually see this?
I think it has to be. It can't be a love-hate relationship. It has to be a love-only relationship. And of course, it's all physics. So I need to understand what gravity is doing up there.
So, Sajid, tell us something about your childhood. How have your formative days been? Growing up to a risk-aversive society. What has really, made you as a person?
So the initial 7 years of my life, I was raised in Kuwait. In fact, I witnessed the Gulf War. That's when my whole family, we were airlifted and we moved back to Bombay. Um, I remember, it was a pretty crazy journey. Uh, my father actually, we saw him, us resettling back into India, him trying to find work and creating his own name over here because we lost everything, and I think that created a big impact on us psychologically also, because we had very few means that time growing up, and so we had to manage within that. Coming into this risk-averse society, and my elder brother being the crazy guy, I was told, Sajid, you have to be the responsible one. So, of course, I did enjoy my studies. I have no regrets for that. Uh, the other thing I really enjoyed was fine arts, and that was my go-to space basically. So I grew up creating models, doing a lot of designing stuff, which now I implement in my life. Which back then was like, okay, all this is useless. This will never be applicable to what you do in life. And I mean, that's what people always tell you, right? Where are you gonna use this in your life later on? I mean, where are you gonna use trigonometry, and where are you gonna use UT plus half 80 square? And now I show them this is where I use while jumping off a cliff.
Wow. So, what was the exact trigger that actually led you into skydiving? Was there some sort of a story behind that?
As I mentioned earlier, of course, there was, what you see, what you consume on television. Of course, Nat Geo documentaries, Discovery channels, and I've met all these heroes I grew up watching. To name a few, Yoki Sommer and Espen Fadnes, they were my heroes growing up. Both Norwegian guys who I keep bumping into every year. The real trigger, as I said earlier, was, Sajid, you can't do this, you can't do that. Just like, don't break your bones. Try to live a normal life. Why can't you get a job? And Sajid is trying to create his own space over here, trying to discover himself. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I think there is a world beyond this. Okay, people are living this way, but maybe I don't want to. And that's how I decided to join the tribe of the Sky People.
So, Sajid, about your family, how integral have they been in your aspirations of, being a skydiver?
Uh, to look back, I think initially they were not at all happy, because I mean, who would be happy of their son, going out, jumping out of airplanes, jumping out of paramotors, jumping off mountains? Initially, I think everyone is gonna freak out, and that's the usual story. But slowly, as they see that you're passionate about these things, that you're making stories, that you're bringing about a change, that you're sharing these experiences, especially when they get calls from their family or friends from other cities, hey, Sajid is on the news or he's on the radio, then somewhere they feel like, okay, this guy is doing something cool, and he's he's just living his life, he's happy. But also all this is possible because somewhere they do support. Somewhere I know my dad goes out and tells his friends, hey, you know what, like my son does this crazy shit, check out his videos or his YouTube channel. I know he does that because people later tell me that, but on my face he'll never show that, hey, this is great.
I think most dads are like that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the inspiration comes from the family. My dad used to be a sailor. When we were growing up, he had given up sailing by that time. But the stories he told us and raised us with, and me and my brother would be like, hey, someday we should have our own adventure stories, and maybe tell this guy like what we can do. Maybe, I don't know. That's the trigger, probably.
Wow, fantastic. So Sajid, it all started in the US for you. So how has the journey been so far?
I'll be very frank. I mean, there were a lot of ups and downs. It's been a great ride, I would say. It's been 10 years since I started jumping. 2010. So I used to live in USA 2007 to 11. That's where I got the opportunity to experience skydiving, and I decided to make it a lifestyle choice for me, right? I used to live in Philadelphia over there, and it wasn't that I just took up the sport one fine day. It was gradual. So what US cities do is they give you this opportunity to explore, whatever activity it is. So it's any sport is very accessible over there, be it snowboarding or surfing or skydiving or any extreme sports, adventure sports. It all started for me with simple things like running, and then cycling, long distance cycling, dragon boat racing out in the Schuylkill River that flows through Philadelphia. And then one fine day, my friend is like, hey, have you tried skydiving? I'm like, what do you mean try? I've done the tandem jump. They're like, no, you can get your license into that. I'm like, wait a minute, why didn't they tell me that first? Because I would have just gone for that, right? So that's how I chased the license. Within a year, I got the A license, the B license, which are basically based on number of jumps, which counts as experience. And the way skydiving works is the experience helps you negotiate anything that goes wrong in the thing. I think anyone can jump out of an airplane, fly a canopy and land, but when things go wrong, they exponentially they escalate into something worse, right? So how do you tackle that? That is what training teaches you. Through these 10 years, so I moved back to India in 2011, and I thought, I knew I'm going to be in the sport, so I bought a new rig. A rig is basically your parachute system, and I'm trying to like find centers over here. There's nothing. I mean, there were few, but then they were just like a few months of the year, and I'm trying to connect with people. Hey, who's skydiving over here? Let's do something. So a few people I came across, for example, Satyendra Verma, who's been one of the biggest influencers for me in India and a great mentor, I would say. But then there was no full-time center over here, so that was being difficult. So I just started doing trips to Dubai, Thailand, just upping my skills, saving money, because again, living in USA, you're earning in dollars. It's accessible, it's cheap. You can do this over a weekend. In India, that's not the case. You're burning money flying here and there or traveling out of the country. So I had to try to find a more sustainable way, and then I would just save up and plan like bigger trips where I could do a month or two, just go jump, up my skills, and that's how I sustained over the years.
Nice. So how are you actually sort of propagating this messaging to the audience here in India? So can you?
So the whole extreme sports community is it's not, because I mean we have 1.5 1.6 billion of a people. Of course, majority of our people are still trying to meet their basic needs. So for someone to think about adventure sports or extreme sports takes time. The ones that are accessible are, just to give you an example, the people who are into rock climbing are not people who have who have all their means well set. These are actually people from lower economic backgrounds, right? Because they get an opportunity to prove themselves. And I've seen this because I've worked with a lot of rock climbing kids in Bombay, and that's their fighting chance, and that's where they actually go ahead and create a name for themselves also. I've seen these guys go and compete internationally. And that's the sad reality about our country, because when it comes to extreme sports, everyone thinks, oh my god, this is super expensive, I can't plan for this. But there is a method, there is a way. Me coming from a middle class background also, I had to plan all these things. It wasn't I had all the money to spend on these things, because it's not cheap. It's super expensive. And as I said, if you make it a lifestyle choice, you have to be totally committed to do something like this. And then you figure out ways, you pick up skills, you start bartering your skills. Whenever you travel, you start working at different drop zones, at different centers. The community then comes in really handy, and that's what's needed in India also, to spread the word. And that's what I try to do, to showcase people more and more of this content, of this lifestyle. Okay, hey, we're not just madmen chasing this crazy dream, or just for the adrenaline rush. There is a method to the madness, and you can try it yourself. That's been my agenda.
Great. So that brings me to a very important question, Sajid. So how do you intend to or plan to build a jumping ecosystem in India?
Okay, that's a great question. We need to understand the entry barriers to skydiving or setting up a business in skydiving are very high, right? Like, there's different factors that come into the picture, right from having a controlled airspace in our country, to like people just trying to make a living, buy a house, get married and all that. They're not going to think about making this like their main sport. So what is essential is, number one, having a community around it, educating more people, trying to showcase that it's not, of course it's a dangerous sport, but it can be done safely if practiced correctly. The way businesses also need to operate is, the real money comes in from tandem jumps, because you can charge whatever a slightly bigger amount, because as a licensed jumper, what are we paying for? We're paying for that slot on the airplane to jump out of the airplane. So it's not, for us, we're not going to pay more than $2,000 for it, or 2,000 rupees, I would say. Financially, it doesn't make real sense unless they get a bigger airplane, they get more jumpers. But to get more jumpers, you need to educate more people around the sports, get more youth involved. It's going to take some time, but someday we'll definitely get there. Hopefully, as the standard of living of people also starts improving. There are some businesses that do operate, but they keep shifting, sometimes in the north, sometimes in the south, based on what the trend is and how people are reacting to the activity.
So, Sajid, in diving terminology, we have this word called free fall. So, how many minutes or hours of free fall do you have under your belt?
Sure. So, just to explain what free fall is, it's you falling just under the influence of gravity without having your parachute open. So, just plummeting towards planet Earth. Translating the number of jumps that I have, some 350 plus.
Wow.
With some 20 base jumps, or jumps with my base jumping rig. I think the number of minutes translate to 6 hours, around 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the time I've been up there in space.
Fantastic. So this brings me to the most fascinating question that I actually had. I mean, about you. I mean, what goes on in your mind, before taking that, final leap of faith, if I may?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually call it the leap of faith because there is, you need to trust yourself, you need to trust your skills as to what you've done right from the stage of packing to, your current state of mind, and even like free falling and deploying in the correct duration, and until you land safely. So basically you're not safe until you touch ground safely, right? So right now, I mean, if you would have asked me this question few years ago when I was probably under 100 jumps, I would have said, I'm like, yeah, it's super exciting, like I don't know, I'm super high or whatever, super stoked. If you ask me right now, it's a state of tranquility, it's a very peaceful state. I know, and of course it comes through experience, because you have packed your canopy well, your canopy is going to open beautifully in the right direction if jumping from a mountain, away from the mountain, things like that. And actually my dear friend Vijay Sethi, who's my paramotor pilot, he's told me that he's one of the guys who sees me up front when jumping off from 2000 feet or higher. He always tells me my state of emotion once we reach. He's like, अच्छा साजिद भाई, आज है ना आप बहुत peaceful लग रहे थे, या आज आपके दिमाग में कुछ चल रहा था. I was observing that, and yeah, so that, I hope that explains it.
Yeah, it does.
Close my eyes so I can see memories recall. You were right in
So look, I mean, there's no denying that this is a risky sport, So how mentally prepared are you, before taking that jump, or maybe, if you have certain, checklists that you actually follow before taking a jump? I think our audience would be interested in, understanding that as well. So
Sure. Talking about the dangers about the sport, yes, these are extremely dangerous. Skydiving, of course, has evolved a lot, because you have your main canopy and then you have your backup canopy. So even if you do mess up, you still have your reserve that you can use. Of course, people don't go jumping blindly by just expecting that the reserve will open. Usme bhi complications, I mean, within that also complications do happen. There is, okay, so I would say skydiving or base jumping is like flying an airplane, any airplane, right? There is a checklist you have to go through. For flight engineers do that on big airplanes. For us, it starts from the state of mind that you pack your parachute in. Ensure that the lines have been stored correctly so that they don't cause any entanglement or tension knots when they open, when the canopy extracts out of your container. That's like step one. Of course, when you're closing the pin of the container, ensuring that you have complete focus on that, because you can cause bag locks over there, or you can cause container locks basically, so it will never open and you'll crash to your death. That's of course step two. The next thing is, even like when deploying a pilot chute, or when you're on the edge of the cliff, or jumping from a paramotor, ensuring that things are not stuck elsewhere, because one small entanglement issue can just mess up your jump completely, or you can hit the cliff or just plummet down without the canopy being extracted in the right time. So there's multiple factors. Then again, flying your canopy in the right direction, landing safely. So as I said earlier, until you land safely, the jump isn't over. So there are these checklists that are continuously happening in your head, and as you check them out, you're eliminating that small thing that will play in your mind, in your head later during the jump. So once that is open, once the canopy is open, okay, now I just need to fly properly, away from the cliff and create a good landing pattern, and not land in traffic, hopefully, or in an oncoming vehicle. People have done that. So things like that.
yeah, fantastic.
Come on, Jack.
I love you guys. Pepe, love you. Happy birthday, Richard! Happy birthday!
So, what do you think is the biggest factor which could actually lead to accidents? Would it be a human error, or it could be equipment issues? What do you think would actually cause these problems?
Sure. So, to be very frank, the equipment has evolved since aerial extreme sports started, right? Like right from wingsuits to parachutes to base jumping rigs, everything has been tested so many times that it has evolved, and it's beautiful the way that evolution has taken place. Uh, the biggest factor for accidents today is still human error, sadly. I mean, you cannot get complacent about the sport. You need to be constantly observing, what you're doing, what frame of mind are you in, are you around the right people, do you know your limits, are you doing things beyond your capacity, because what happens is sometimes peer pressure plays a lot, be it skydiving or be it base jumping or anything you want to advance into. Your friends are like, hey, yes, we're gonna do this, we're gonna jump off this cliff or la la la, but you're not ready for it yet. You need to know when to take that call and be like, hey guys, this is not my cup of tea, I think I'm just gonna wait this out. Same thing, and of course having good people around you makes this thing easier, because they'll be like, hey, you know what, Sajid, I think you should get few more jumps, or I think you need to work on your canopy skills, you'll be fine after that, then we can try this again. Because the mountain is always going to be there, you'll always, you can come back and try the jump anytime in your life. But if you screw up over there, you're done for good, or you'll be in a hospital for some time. There is so for example, I'll give you an example, right? Like in Norway, we jump in the fjords. It's a 1 kilometer cliff. It's one of the most safest spots, I would say. The landing is a bit tight. It's actually not tight. It's a big landing area, but you need to understand the kind of landing pattern you want to create to land over there. You can do it in whatever weather conditions. You can jump. Of course, if the winds are too high, if it's not in my comfort zone, I don't jump. I walk back out of the mountain, and I'm okay with that, because I don't want to break my bones. The the easiest worst thing that you can do is just land in the water in the fjords. It's super cold, and there's always a boat that will pick you out. But then people are like, no, that plays with my ego, I want to make it to the landing spot. But when you try doing that in bad wind conditions or in stronger wind conditions, you can easily hit a rock. I've seen that happen with good friends of mine. It's a learning experience, but you learn it the hard way. So over there, the saying is, like your canopy will dry faster than your bones, broken bones would heal. So just choose the water, man. I don't think there's any shame to that.
Getting a lot of love from the community. That's really nice. Extreme sports. It's dangerous.
So, Sajid, if I were to ask you the top 3 moments, what would they be?
Oh, that's a really tough question, because I think there's probably a top 3 million moments. Okay, top 3, number 1 would be, I invited my dad to Philadelphia when I was living there, and they didn't know that I was doing all these activities. So I took him to the drop zone. I made him sit on a bench over there, and this was a tiny drop zone I started off jumping at. He didn't see me going on the plane, nothing. The plane flew, we took off, I jumped, and I landed right in front of
Wow.
him. And he's like, holy shit, like I'm telling mom. So that was number 1.
Must be a proud moment for him, huh?
I don't know if it was a proud moment that time, because he did freak out a bit. I think all parents would, unless you're from the military, then yeah, it's a different story. Number 2 was, it was my 30th jump. I was jumping in a drop zone in Arizona, one of the biggest actually, called Skydive Arizona, in a city called Eloy. and I was one of the last jumpers. It was the time was evening. So in Arizona, what happens is families just drive down to drop zones, sit, and they're observing these skydivers come down, forming, making formations, or even just landing their fast canopies. And kids love it, right? So I was the last jumper. I came in, and this kid came running from the fence, and he high-fived me. And I'm like, whoa. He said like, oh dude, that was awesome, right? And I'm like, holy shit, I just made a small impact on this child, which I later saw on a bigger scale when I landed in a stadium in Karad in Maharashtra. So yeah, that was number 2. Number 3 would probably be a memory from 2 years back in Norway, where I was part of a rescue operation. This probably mid-60s guy, he was kind of like stuck on the cliff because he couldn't walk down. He had some issues walking down, and the weather was totally bad. I was supposed to be the last jumper to jump off the cliff, but it was so bad that we had to back out. So that 2 hour of hike, which was supposed to be for 2 hours, it took us around 6 hours, because we had to like drag him, slide him, me, and there were 2 other guys who were part of that operation. And then just like few meters later, I don't remember the exact elevation, but there was a rescue party that later joined us. And yeah, he was super thankful of what had been done. Could have turned out pretty bad, but luckily everyone was fine. So yeah, that was number 3.
Wow. I think this is more for the audience, Sajid. So, what does it exactly take to be a skydiver?
Oh boy, that's a really tough question. So, I think number 1, you need to grow a beard. Just joking. It takes dedication for sure. You need to, like when we were talking about the checklist, you need to prepare a way to eliminate things that start playing on your mind. You need to find out. So it's kind of like meditation, where you're just mindfulness, trying to be in your own circle, understanding and observing every small little thing. That, and just be humble, be open to learn, open to explore, open to ask questions, and don't let your ego come into the picture, because you'll be like, yeah, I know all this, like I've figured this out, because that can be dangerous, and that can someday injure or kill you. Yeah, I think that is the basis.
Okay, and if you were to spot someone in the crowd, would you be in a position to actually say that, okay, he's got the right physical frame, maybe, to be a skydiver? Is that something that you can actually judge and come down to a conclusion with, in terms of tagging him as a skydiver as such?
I don't think there's a formula to that, right? Of course, being fit helps. It's an added advantage, because you can do a lot more maneuvers in the sky. So, for example, being stock or having a paunch helps you free fall like a rock, because you'll be super stable no matter how you jump out of the airplane or what your exit is. But your maneuvers then become limited. Whereas being lean, tall gives you a different advantage, because your spread is much more. So you can change your free fall, the speed of your fall. You can keep changing it mid-flight. Of course, being tall also gives you more forward direction if you need that. But it varies, and I don't think you can just spot. So, when youngsters ask me, hey, I want to get into skydiving or base jumping, where do I start? In India, I tell them the first thing you need to do is just go and experience flying. Be it paragliding or whatever is accessible to you around your space. If you enjoy the feeling of just being under a canopy, or just being out there above land, floating, hovering, or whatever that is you do, if you like that experience, then slowly think about skydiving, because it's gonna be a big hit on your pocket initially. And yeah, if you think you want to commit to it, then you can commit to it. Otherwise, there's no secret formula to spotting someone.
Okay. So, how else do we know Sajid? What else does he do?
Okay, so when I'm not jumping out of airplanes or mountains or buildings or paramotors, I am actually a creative director at lumaworld.in, which is a brand me and 3 other people co-founded. So the whole idea is at Luma we create educational fun products for children, but they're designed from a child's point of view. For example, what do kids fantasize, right? They fantasize about space, about galaxies, about travel, about robots, about flying, about all the fun stuff, right? Now, how do you take curriculum and fit it in or design it in such a way that a child will be engaged with it, right? Like if you go to a school and or you talk to a child, they're like, oh, I'm afraid of fractions, right? Or I'm afraid of geometry, or I don't know what algebra is. How do you engage the child into learning? And the way we figure it out is through fun and play. So we've designed these the Luma learning way is what we call it. It's basically a 4-in-1 method. So you have a concept guidebook, you have a game, you have these themed workbooks, and you have flashcards which help you with mental maths. The workbooks, what they do is they're not like your typical problem solving workbooks. They're rather, you take curriculum and you help a child understand the real life application of where you'll be using this maths. This, of course, other than this, there's a lot of social factors, social skills that children learn. So for example, empathy or collaboration or sharing, or patience for that matter. So most of our games, we keep them open card games or collaborative games because we want a child not to do just like their own thing in a silo, rather talk to other kids, talk to adults. That's another thing, we bring in the adults into the gaming aspect. So the game are designed, these can actually be great party games. I'm not joking, I've actually tested them at drunk parties.
Fantastic. So what does your day look like, on a typical day? How do you make yourself productive? So you want to throw some light on that?
Sure. I don't want to make this sound really fancy. Right now, since a year, it's been that I have been putting almost 11 to 12 hours every day into this. Also because it's super fun, but the bigger reason is because we feel, and we've seen this over the year by testing these products with 600 plus children, that it is actually bringing a difference in their lives. When my mom calls me and she's like, hey Sajid, the kids from the society had come to our house today for asking for new games. That's like a big victory for me, because have you heard that, like children coming to your house and be like, hey, I want to play your games, which in turn they're actually applying their mathematical knowledge. And that is the mindset we want to change, that fun and learning can be done together. Productivity wise, other than this, I keep doodling, I keep designing stuff. I'm sure you must have seen my political art as well. But there's a lot of reading also that happens. I have to fit in a bit of workout time into my schedule. There's a tiny climbing setup or hanging setup I have built in my house. Just to keep your bones and mind fit.
That's good. So, Sajid, future-wise, what kind of projects do you have in the pipeline? How do you sort of integrate your outdoor adventure to what you're doing here?
Okay, that's a cool question. So, pipeline-wise, I think this takes up a lot of my time right now, but I do keep planning a lot of creative projects. I try to pitch ideas to agencies, to brands, just gauge their level of interest, because India has yet to explore a lot when it comes to aerial adventure sports. In fact, for any adventure sport, but mountaineering and all that, still it's being done. You'll see content around it. You'll see ads and brands sponsoring people. When it comes to aerial adventure sports, there's still a lot of work to be done. And for that, because the way brands approach it is, what is the ROI I'm getting on this? What is the return on investment, right? And for me to show that, I need to bring in a lot of content. I need to showcase, what goes on in these kind of activities, or what can be done. and that has been my goal also, to showcase these activities in the right light. So talking project wise now, I will be in Norway in June. The two big reasons that take me there, of course, the environment over there is perfect for these kind of activities. They have the right attitude for such things. There's an event called Heliboogie that happens in a place called Lisebotn, which is the fjord region where I usually jump. So I help them out during the event. There is another big event that happens. It's called Extreme Sports Week, or Extreme Sport Veko in Norwegian. So in a span of 10 days, they execute all activities, all extreme sports, land, air, water, and you can go volunteer, you can go participate as an athlete, you can just cover the activity as a media guy or a camera guy. But the whole, and I did experience this in 2017. I volunteered over there, and I just felt like you are taken into this some other universe itself, because as I said, 10 days non-stop extreme sports around you, it's just fantastic. And if you want to try out activities, this is one of the best spots you can do. Being a volunteer, your food is covered, your stay, you get some discounts to, if you want to stay in a dorm, or if you just want to pitch your tent. I would highly recommend this event for sure. Other than that, creative jump wise, I think there is something in my head which I have been working in my close circle, and I think that will take India to the next level as well.
Wow, we look forward to that.
Thank you.
So, Sajid, I think we've spent almost like about an hour having a conversation with you, and I'm actually really inspired, by you and your journey. I'm sure the audience out there would be keen to follow what you've actually been doing as well. So, do you believe in one success mantra that you actually have, which our audience can take away?
Yeah, I mean. Okay, so it's not too difficult, right? Dream big, but set smaller goals, achievable goals, which help you work towards your dream. And it's as simple as that. Don't take a no from anyone. If you have a dream and you think you want to work in that direction, do it. People will say it's not practical, it's not achievable, all that will happen, but you will find the right people who will guide you, who will mentor you into whatever you want to achieve. Just be passionate about it. That's it.
Great. So thank you so much, Sajid, for being patient with us and giving us a view of what you actually are doing in the skydiving circuit, and from the educational standpoint for the kids. It was really a great learning for us. Thank you so much for joining the 505 Circle, and I'm sure that the audience out there would be really inspired by your journey, and a lot of the Indians would actually pick up skydiving as a profession going forward.
I hope so. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me anytime on social media, be it Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. I'm always there to answer your queries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.